Hey everyone, check out how Ted Cruz totally goes off on this nominee who's a judge about the alleged ties that she has had to communist organizations. Check out how she responds to it.
I'm going to quickly note there's a reason the Democrats have scheduled you on this panel, because you have a long pattern of sentencing criminal defendants to egregiously light sentences, including one child molester who molested a 4-year-old and 9-year-old, and you sentenced him to only 6 years in prison, including, as we heard before, one woman who was responsible for killing her 1-year-old son, who was coated in fentanyl. His pajamas were coated in fentanyl. His sheets were coated in fentanyl. You could have sentenced her to 30 years. You sentenced her to only 4 years. It's an egregious pattern, but the reason you're put on this panel is the Democrats know that most Republicans will not have time to question you about that terrible record, because your colleague on this panel, her record is even worse. Ms. Campbell, I will say I have seen some astonishing nominees from this administration, but I have to admit your record takes the cake. A judge should not be a political activist. Your record demonstrates to me a long history of being a political activist, but not just an activist who affiliates with extreme and radical organizations. Now, when Senator Grassley asked you about the Workers' Dignity Organization, you gave, I think, deliberately misleading answer. You said you did not represent them, and that convinced Senator Grassley not to continue on that line of questioning. You have been a legal advisor to that organization since 2013. That is what you have publicly printed on your AVO biography. It is what has been described in the Tennessee Bar Association when you were nominated. It explicitly says she served as a legal advisor for local workers' rights nonprofit Workers' Dignity. Now, why is it you're distancing yourself from them? The reason is because they are utterly radical. If you look at this group that you've served as the legal advisor for over a decade, this is an openly Marxist organization. This is a communist organization. Now, those words are not said lightly. According to their own characterization of their views, this group says there's no election outcome that improves conditions for workers. The laws of this country have never worked for our people, and now that the system is crumbling, we will continue to stand in community and solidarity with each other. The only way we win in a world we deserve is by building a multiracial working class revolution that can push out white nationalism, violent state racism, and the capitalist class that is desperately clutching to hold control and profits as the people rise up. Why have you spent a decade as a legal advisor to an openly communist and Marxist organization? I don't think your microphone's on.
I apologize, Senator. If I could briefly clarify, more than a decade ago, probably for the course of 2 or 3 years, I served on an advisory board that helped this, at the time, was supposed to be a nonprofit workers' rights organization get set up and get started.
Did you know they were a communist organization?
Senator, at that time, they did not express these kinds of views. It was an organization.
So this is new. This wasn't the case then?
Yes, and I have not been affiliated with them in more than a decade.
You're aware that your current profile that you have up, your legal bio, says you are right now an advisor to them?
I apologize for any confusion about that.
So your testimony under oath, and that's all right, the facts will come out, but your testimony, I want to make it explicit. Your testimony under oath is that you have done absolutely nothing and had zero contact with them for how long?
I have not served on their advisory board for...
You've done absolutely nothing and had zero contact with them for how long? Please answer the question.
Many, many years. Senator.
How many?
I don't know, sitting here today. It's been many years.
I don't know about what you feel about what you just watched, but this woman, she's just creepy. She is lying left and right, but as Ted Cruz is sharing some of her stance in her ruling with people who have done horrific things to children, and she's taking their sentence, and in this case, instead of 30 years, gave the person 4 years. I mean, how is this even being allowed in our country? Who is like an oversight committee or or organization that's looking at these judges to make sure that they are ruling with the law and not trying to let people who are committing these horrific crimes get lesser sentences and then let them out to do this all over again. Ted Cruz is catching her in so many lies. I hope to God she does not get nominated, but even put that aside, I hope that she's removed from the bench and she's no longer able to be a judge. She's obviously taking the side of the criminals. She's not even caring about the people who are, victims, but even their families and their loved ones. I mean, this is just ridiculous that this is allowed to go on in our country, that there's no oversight to make sure these judges cannot take their political values and have that make them rule differently in as a judge. I mean, that is just mind-blowing. You guys, watch how when Ted Cruz asked this human rights campaign president a specific question about men and women, check out what her answer was.
Title IX was a landmark civil rights law. It helped create the incredible breadth of women's sports and girls' sports that we see across the country.
That was completely disgraceful when Riley had to go behind the podium to get her trophy. She knows they tied, and she's